the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
There's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea. We stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
A recent tragic event, like the Texas floods, often sparks these immediate reactions, right? Strong narratives in the media.
Absolutely. They take hold very quickly.
But have you ever wondered if those narratives are doing more than just, informing us? What if they're actually shaping our perception?
How we see things.
Yeah, in ways we might not even realize, almost like a belief system in themselves.
That's an interesting angle.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into an independent reporter's, truly unconventional look at climate alarmism.
Michael Schellenberger's piece.
Exactly. Using those devastating Texas floods as a case study, we'll explore his perspective on how information gets framed, how crucial historical context can just vanish.
And the deeper cultural forces he thinks are at play behind it all.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack these insights. We want to help you understand what might really be going on behind the headlines.
With some surprising facts and perspectives, maybe things people haven't considered.
Definitely a shortcut to being well-informed, without feeling totally overwhelmed by it all.
And what's compelling here, I think, is how this source really challenges us to think beyond just the immediate news cycle.
Go deeper.
Yeah. To consider the underlying motivations, maybe the structures of some of these widespread narratives. We'll look not just at what was reported initially.
But why Schellenberger believes it matters, giving that broader context to a very current, very raw issue.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The recent Texas floods were, no question, just devastating.
Horrific scenes.
And the reporter, Schellenberger, he highlights these storms ripping through central Texas, specifically the Guadalupe River in Kerr County.
Yes, that area was hit incredibly hard.
Leading to at least 100 deaths, and tragically that number was expected to rise.
And the river itself, the speed was unbelievable.
He notes it rose a staggering 20-plus feet in just 90 minutes.
90 minutes, it's hard to even fathom.
And here's where his reporting takes that crucial turn, the bit that might surprise people. He notes that almost immediately.
The narrative formed.
Yeah, parts of the media quickly ran with narratives blaming Donald Trump's administration.
Because of cuts to NOAA and the National Weather Service?
That was the claim. And also suggesting the NWS was short-staffed for the event.
Okay, so this raises the big question then. What was the actual situation, according to Schellenberger's investigation?
Right. What did he find?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture he's painting, his piece points out that those budget cuts to NOAA and the NWS, they weren't even scheduled to go into effect yet.
Not yet.
Not until next year.
Okay, wow. So that part of the narrative doesn't quite line up with the timeline.
It seems not. And furthermore, he states the NWS was actually overstaffed for this specific weather system.
Overstaffed, not understaffed.
Correct. And they did send out alerts. The critical problem, Schellenberger asserts, wasn't the alerts themselves.
It was.
It was that basically no one in the affected area got them, because the region simply doesn't have a flood warning system in place.
A local system.
Exactly. Apparently, it's a system the public there had previously rejected, mainly due to cost concerns.
That's a critical detail. Often missed, I imagine.
Very easily missed in the rush to find a broader cause.
So, if it wasn't budget cuts affecting it now, and it wasn't NWS staffing, what is Schellenberger's core argument about why these tragic deaths occurred?
He really brings it back to basics. He emphasizes that floods, well, they aren't new phenomena.
We've always had them.
And they aren't necessarily caused solely by climate change in every instance. He stresses that these deaths happen in what he calls one of the highest flood-prone regions in the entire state.
So geography and local preparedness are key factors he's highlighting.
Precisely. It shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from maybe immediate global climate blame in this specific instance, towards those critical local realities, things like geography, infrastructure, warning systems.
Things that often get overlooked when the narrative's bigger.
Indeed. And building on that, Schellenberger's analysis reminds us that humans have, successfully confronted challenges like floods for millennia. It's not an insurmountable problem.
He brings in history.
Yeah, he points to ancient civilizations, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, China, Rome. They all constructed canals, levees, dikes, aqueducts.
Managing water, safeguarding cities.
Right. It's a powerful reminder that while we often focus on the immediate crisis, these historical solutions and proactive infrastructure, they can be incredibly impactful. We have a track record.
And you see it in the modern era, too. Even more clearly, perhaps.
Definitely.
Countries like the U.S., the Netherlands, they've significantly reduced flood-related deaths.
How? Through things like robust early warning systems.
Basic infrastructure, levees, drainage.
And crucially, coordinated evacuation plans. Knowing what to do and having the means to do it.
We've tackled this before. It's solvable.
And a really powerful example Schellenberger cites is Bangladesh.
Ah, yes, I remember reading that part.
It was once tragically known as Flood Central, just devastating recurring floods.
That they changed things.
Massively. They transformed the situation by investing heavily in flood prevention protocols, and they developed this elaborate, multi-layered flood warning system.
And the result?
It has dramatically reduced fatalities. He highlights Cyclone Citrang in 2022. That system successfully evacuated 1 million people.
1 million people.
Saving countless lives. So this historical and global context, it provides a really profound contrast, he argues, to some of the narratives presented right after the Texas floods.
Suggesting that the solutions often lie in these pragmatic, on-the-ground measures, not just high-level debate.
That seems to be his point. Adaptation, infrastructure, local systems.
Okay. Now, this is where Schellenberger's piece, it gets truly provocative.
Yes, he definitely shifts gears here.
He explores how, in his view, climate alarmism has become a lucrative industry for the media.
Going beyond just fear cells.
He takes it further to what he controversially terms panic pornography. It's a strong phrase.
Very strong. What does he mean by that exactly?
He suggests it's an amplification of fear, maybe detached from proportionate risk. He even notes data, like 1 in 5 children in the UK reportedly suffering nightmares about impending climate doom because of it.
Wow. So digging deeper into that, Schellenberger argues that part of this climate narrative he's critiquing is, strictly ideological.
Not purely scientific.
Not in his view. He suggests that climate alarmism provides, and these are his words, radical Malthusian activists and intellectuals.
Okay, those who believe population growth is the core problem.
Right. He says it gives them a moral justification for demanding the dismantling of Western civilization.
That's a huge claim. How does he connect that?
In his view, it frames fossil fuels not just as, say, a technical problem needing a solution.
But it's something inherently bad.
Yes, as a symbol of greed, colonialism, and inequality. It loads it with moral weight beyond just the emissions.
So from Schellenberger's perspective, it stops being just about the environment. It becomes a vehicle for other goals.
That's his argument. Broader political goals like wealth redistribution, maybe centralization of power, permanent subsidies for green industries.
And instead of focusing on practical solutions like adaptation, the kind we just talked about, infrastructure, innovation,
he claims it promotes this vision of, quote, collapse and forced transformation. Less about physics, he asserts, and much more about power dynamics.
less about solving the problem, more about restructuring society through the lens of the problem.
That seems to be the core of his critique there.
And what's particularly thought-provoking next is his analogy. He compares it to secularized Christianity.
Right. That comparison definitely makes you stop and think. How does he draw that parallel?
He describes a structure he sees as familiar. Humanity has sinned.
By burning fossil fuels?
Right. The planet then suffers punishment.
Through floods, fires, storms, the consequences.
And salvation comes through repentance and sacrifice.
Which translates to?
Giving up consumption, flying less, eating plants, and, crucially, trusting the technocratic authorities setting the policies.
So it mirrors that religious framework of sin, punishment, redemption.
That's his point. He posits that this framework replaces God with the science, sin with carbon emissions, and redemption with policy obedience.
Interesting. It promises both judgment, the climate disasters.
And deliverance, if you follow the righteous path.
Yeah.
But he adds only for the righteous.
Channeling maybe guilt, fear, even the human desire for meaning into this narrative that demands personal purity and societal transformation.
It's a really interesting psychological take on it.
But this raises an important question then. How, in Schellenberger's analysis, does this differ from traditional Christianity, if he's drawing the parallel?
He highlights some key distinctions he sees. He argues Christianity traditionally offers forgiveness, hope, grace.
Whereas climate alarmism, in his view,
often offers no forgiveness, only permanent guilt and endless sacrifice. The individual, he says, remains complicit, sort of inherently, regardless of their actions.
A sense of inescapable guilt.
That's the idea. He also notes that where Christianity locates authority in a transcendent God,
Climate ideology, he argues, places it in expert institutions and bureaucratic consensus. Trust the plan. Trust the experts.
and critically, he argues that while Christianity generally separates the sin from the sinner, allowing for mercy,
Climate alarmism, he feels, tends to treat dissent itself as heresy.
and skeptics are framed not just as wrong, but as morally corrupt.
So the result, in his view, is this belief system that kind of mimics religion's structure.
But replaces its spiritual core with politics, fear, and control. That's his argument.
It's a heavy critique.
It really is. And this discussion of, cult-like behavior, it begs the question, what cultural forces does Schellenberger suggest are feeding this alarmism he describes?
Right, why now? He points to a few things. Rising secularism, for one.
Less traditional religion.
Maybe leaving a void for meaning or moral frameworks. He also mentions, interestingly, overprotective parenting and maybe indulgent education.
How do they connect?
And the decline of reading. He thinks these factors have potentially weakened the public's ability to think historically, think critically?
Less resilience, maybe. Less perspective.
Perhaps. Social media, he notes, definitely amplifies this by rewarding emotion over reflection, fear over facts, quick reactions over deep thought.
Makes sense. Without those traditional religious frameworks, he suggests some might turn to climate activism for that sense of purpose, morality.
And without maybe demanding schools or deep historical knowledge, people lose perspective on how societies have solved huge problems like floods before.
So people absorb the panic, he suggests, more easily than the context or the long view.
It's a challenging thought about our current cultural moment.
But here's where it gets really interesting again. Schellenberger suggests we are actually seeing a massive backlash against this climate alarmism he's been describing.
A turning point.
He thinks so. He cites the 2024 election, for instance, as potentially reflecting some of this pushback.
Interesting. And what about the media's role in all this, according to him?
Yes. He has strong words for the media's role.
I imagine. He claims the media didn't just report this narrative.
He says it created it, fed it, and enforced its boundaries.
Turning skepticism into sin, basically, and scientific consensus into dogma.
Pretty strong framing of the media's influence there.
Very. However, he argues that as the narrative becomes, in his words, increasingly extreme and detached from reality,
People notice.
more people, he argues, are walking away. They're turning to independent voices, alternative sources.
And he points to evidence.
He points to public trust in media plummeting, down to just 31%, he notes. That's a significant number, a huge drop.
Wow, only 31%. So, stepping back, what does this bigger picture tell us, according to Schellenberger?
Well, he suggests something quite counterintuitive, maybe, that the media's shrinking cultural power in this specific space
Might actually be a good thing.
might be the healthiest development of all, in his words. He sees potential for things to change for the better,
A shift away from what he calls the climate apocalypse narrative.
towards maybe a more grounded, pragmatic approach to energy and natural disasters. He believes people are starting to reject the idea that literally every flood, fire, or storm is evidence of societal collapse.
A return to nuance, perhaps?
Or at least a questioning of the most extreme framings.
Okay. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really explored a powerful and definitely controversial perspective
Absolutely.
on how complex events, like the Texas floods, can become entangled in these media narratives and ideological frameworks that, as Schellenberger argues, go far beyond simple reporting.
We've seen his argument for how historical context and the human capacity for adaptation can get overlooked.
And how a belief system can emerge that, in his view at least, mirrors religion, but replaces that spiritual core with politics and control.
It's a stark analysis, and this deep dive, I think, really reminds us of the critical importance of questioning assumptions.
Always asking questions.
Considering multiple viewpoints, seeking out that broader context in a world just saturated with information, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It challenges us to look for the why behind the what.
And to try and understand the various forces shaping public discourse, not just accept the surfer narrative.
And for you, our listener, the relevance here is, well, it's immense, really, in this age of information overload.
Constant streams of news, opinions.
How do we discern truth from narrative, fact from ideology? It's a crucial skill for navigating the world today.
It really is. And this then raises one final quite difficult question that the source's editor actually wrestles with right at the very end of the material we looked at.
Oh, what's that?
It's about the human element. How do we live with and how do we reconcile ourselves to people who express schadenfreude, that pleasure derived from seeing others suffer?
Right, taking joy in misfortune.
Or who openly wish misery on others affected by these events, like the floods, particularly when political differences seem to fuel such just extreme reactions online and sometimes in person.
It's a tough one. What's the editor's take?
The editor's conclusion is incredibly stark. It's just, you can't. Full stop. Full stop. Which leaves us with a really significant thought to end on, doesn't it? Beyond the facts, beyond the narratives and the policy debates.
How do we navigate the deeply emotional, often incredibly divisive landscape that these topics can create within our own communities with people we know?
Yeah. How do we deal with that human fallout when the discourse gets so polarized? Something to really ponder.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we found. We cherish our Constitution, the words that set us free, the right to bear arms, to speak and to agree. We honor our forefathers who fought with steadfast might for the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles. Together we'll roam. Through trials and through triumphs, we'll never lose our way. With conservative values leading us day by day, we're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we found. So here's to the brave, to the strong, to the free, to the spirit that binds us from sea to shining sea. We'll dive deep into our values, hold them close and true. For conservative hearts, there's no limit to what we can do. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we